Alright guys, so welcome to today's video, and yeah, it is time. So you guys probably thought that the Gear 4 series is the only series which is a part of this 11,000 subscribers special, but no. I have even considered creating a JoJo series for you guys, and in today's video we will work on the stands, especially on the equipping and de-equipping and just the general stand mechanism. So it is not about creating the world or Star Platinum in the first episode. Of course, we will create them and we will create some fire moves for them. But in today's video, we just want to lay the base for the future episodes, okay? Alright, so let's get started with this video by going to plugins, and then going to build rig, and then to select block rig. So of course everything is going to be R15. Okay, and this dummy right here is going to be our test stand. I'm going to call this guy test stand, and we are going to test out those mechanics on this one. And let me show you how to prepare your dummy to be used as a stand. Okay, so that's pretty important. First of all, delete the humanoid. Second thing, select all of those body parts, and then make sure anchored is false, can collide is false, and massless is set to true. And now, right click on this character model, and then insert object, and then look for animation controller, and then add this animation controller to this whole test stand. Okay, and now you're free to move it inside of the replicated storage. You can now even create a folder, so right click on the replicated storage, insert object, and then hit folder, and we can even store all of those stands in this folder just to have them collected in one place. So let's call this one stands. And yeah, so that's all about the test stand preparation. But of course, if you want to add your own stands later on, then you will need to prepare your stands, or your dummy at least, in the same way. But do not worry, we will of course create some complex stands, and I'll show you how to do it again. Alright, next step is to hit replicated storage again, then right click, and then insert object, and then add a remote event, and call this remote event stand remote. You can call it whatever you want to. I'm just gonna call it stand remote, but keep in mind you will need to write down the same name for this remote event within the scripts when you want to refer to it, you know? Okay, next step, go to your starter pack, right click, insert object, and add a local script. And let's call this one stand controller. And let's get started with scripting this one. So what do we need to do, or how is this going to work out? So how are these mechanics going to work? So when we speak of mechanics, we need to get a simple idea of what I'm actually talking about. So under mechanics, we want to count the recognition, or let's say the input, so that the script, or the local script in this case, recognizes or notices when the player has done a certain input, which results in equipping the stand, okay? So that's all about the equipping mechanism, and later on we will work on the de-equipping mechanism. So when the player either has pressed the same key to de-equip or unequip, or has pressed a different key, okay? So those are the two mechanics I'm going to work on in this video. And input recognition is always done by the local script, because the client's input, okay, client-sided, of course, we need to use a local script. Seems logical, at least I hope so. Okay, now, the first thing we want to write down in this local script is a variable. So we want to define a new variable called UIS, and this one is going to store the user input service inside. So game get service user input service. So what does the service do? This service is, as the name already tells you, responsible to deal with the user's input. So by dealing with, or by using the term, I actually mean to detect user inputs, and when those have ended, begun, changed whatsoever, and to even detect the kind of input which has been done. So was it a mouse click, or was it a key press event whatsoever, or was it any other kind of input? Okay, so that's basically the purpose of this user input event. Now, the next thing is to write down one of those events. And the only event which we'll use for now is the input begun event, which describes the event when a player, or a human, let's say, so the user, has pressed the input, which can be a mouse button or which can be a normal key button. So when a player has pressed the button but hasn't let go of it yet, okay? Means the input has begun, but it hasn't ended because the player has not let go of that button. So that's basically what input began is. So if an input has begun, then connect function, and we now can receive, or we can now use two arguments, okay? The first argument describes the kind of input which has been done. The second argument describes, or let's say the second argument is called game processed event, and it describes the case whether the input was done while interacting with in-game elements, such as the chat or any GUIs. Okay, so that's the purpose of the second argument. And you may ask, why do we need the second argument? So it could happen that your player just accidentally presses the button, which activates a stand, for example, while interacting with the chat or any other in-game element. Means the player did not really intend to press the button to activate the stand, and that's why you will need the second argument. But let me just write this down. So the first one is the input, and the second one I'm going to call GPE, game processed event, okay? So those are just the initials. Now, we want to check if this game processed event is not true, means it is not the case. So if the player actually has done this input without interacting with any in-game elements, such as the chat, GUIs, whatsoever. Okay, that's important. And the second check is for the input. So if input key code, so we will use a key button to equip our stand. So if input key code unum key code q, then. So I've decided to use the Q button to activate and deactivate the stand later on. So I'm gonna do both things on one key, and I'm gonna show you how this is going to work out later on. Or I could even show now. So if in order to do that, we need to define another variable. So let's define a player. So player. Game player's local event, local player. I'm sorry, yeah. So that's the way I'm referring to your local player. And yeah. So we can now do the following. As I've already told you, I want to bind those two cases to this Q key. So the first case is of course equipping the stand, and the second one is de-equipping, unequipping the stand. And you may ask how this is going to work out. So we of course need to work with if statements, and you will now need to think of a difference of both states. So the state of a not equipped stand player and the case of a stand equipped player. So what's the difference? Of course, one player has a stand, the other one has not. And what could you check for now? You could of course check for the stand. So if a stand is there, then the player is supposed to unequip. If a stand is not there, then the player is supposed to equip the stand, okay? And that's what we are going to do with this check right here. So if workspace, wait for child, player name, you may ask, how am I able to check for a stand when I'm not even sure where I'm going to place it, you know? So the stand hasn't even been created yet. This is just preparation, okay? So how do I know where the stand is already stored? I, of course, have an idea in my head, okay? So I intend to store the stand inside of the player's character once it has been equipped. Therefore, we need to check for this stand instance within the player's character. And what workspace, wait for child, player name is, it is basically the character. I could either write player.character or this one, okay? But I have made bad experiences with this one, therefore I'm using workspace wait for child player.name. So let me tell you the idea behind of it. So every player's character is stored within the workspace. There are of course exceptions when you have a customized game or something, but I assume that those kind of people wouldn't be watching this video. So in usual cases, your player's character is stored within the workspace and has the same name as your player. Therefore, we can just look for an instance within the workspace which has the same name as your player. And of course, you could run into issues when you have a part, for example, which has the same name as your player. Therefore, make sure that you do not have any instance which has the same name as your player, except for your character, of course. Okay, so that's the idea behind this character reference. The next thing is that we want to check for the certain instance. So find first child. Of course, we only have this one stand right here, therefore test stand. Then so this check right here basically checks for if we have an instance called test stand within our character, then we can continue. And what happens down here is that we are going to hire server this remote event, so we need to refer to it by referring to the replicated storage first of all. Replicated storage, wait for child, stand remote, hire server, unequip. Okay, why unequip? Because we have already checked if there is this stand within our character, and this check passes if that's the case. And if that's the case, then we want to unequip it. And the opposite case would be if there is no stand within the character. So since this topic right here only has two cases, either there is a stand, either there's no stand. There is no stand. We can just define one case, let's say, and the other case would always go with this else, because we only have two cases, you know. So if you check for the other case, if you check for one case, then the other case is pretty much clear already. Therefore, there is no need to further definition, as we have up here. Okay. This case right here is, of course, when we need to equip the stand, means we have no test stand within the character. And that's it. So that's the way on how you recognize whether you want to equip or unequip the stand. And now we need to move on with the actual stand equip and unequip at the end. So let's create a script instead of the server script service. So right click, insert object, and then add the script. Let me call this one stand controller as well. And since we are fire serving this remote event, we need to refer to this remote event again and add this on server event. So this one basically reacts to these fire servers. And we will add some arguments right here once again. And the first argument is not the thing you enter inside of here, but it is the player. Okay, you might ask how? Because we have not added any player. Yo, I was muted all the time. I was explaining. I was explaining, guys. I was explaining. Okay, where did I left off? I forgot. Yeah, so let me just quickly go through this code. So we have the stand right here, which we are cloning. So I'm referring to the stand, I'm cloning it, and I'm putting it inside of the character, okay? Next step is that we are creating a new instance, which is going to be a Veld, and this Veld makes sure that our stand right here is attached to the player, okay? Okay, next step is that we have this part 0, so W part 0, and the part 0 is usually the part you weld something onto. In our case, we want to weld this stand onto our player. Therefore, our part 0 is this player I've just said. Of course, we are welding the stand onto our humanoid root part, therefore character humanoid root part, and we want to weld the stand's core part, means the stand's humanoid root part, to our humanoid root part. And C1 is basically this part 1's C-frame, and the part 1 is our stand's root part. So this position right here makes the stand behind us, okay? So the way you have already seen. Yeah, I'm very sorry. I forgot where I have left off when I had to get AFK. So I was AFK, I had to mute myself, and I forgot to unmute myself later on. Yeah, I'm sorry. I don't know if I have explained this one, but what basically happens here is that we are unequipping the stand, so we have already scripted that mechanism. It is pretty easy to do, because we just need to check for the stand, as we do right here. So we are checking for an instance called test stand within the character, and if it is there, then we want to destroy it. That's everything you have to take care of. We can of course add some cool effects to it, and we will probably do that later on, but let me just first of all move on with the effects for the stand equip. So what can we do for the stand equip? We can now use a tween, so game get service tween service, and then create. So we are creating the tween, and we want to apply this tween on our belt. So W tween info. Now the wait time, let's say 1 second. Easing style, unum easing style. Linear, unum easing direction out. Repeat count 0. Reverse false, and delay time 0. So you can just use these options if you want to. Now, instead of those curly brackets, we need to add the destination, let's say. So in order to understand what I'm talking about, you have to know what a tween does. And I'm going to explain it to you, so do not worry. So C1, C-frame, here we go. Okay, so I can put this to 0, 0, 0, and I can make this tween play, and I'm gonna test this out, and if it works fine, then I'm gonna explain it to you. There we go. Okay, it has worked. Okay. So let me explain to you what has just happened and what this tweening actually does. So this tween, okay, let me explain it to you. So you guys might have gotten a small idea of what this tweening does. So let's say we have this part, okay, and this part wants to be right here, okay? So the left side of the spawn part. You can either pair script, make this part directly go right here without any transition, so that it is here right away within a very small amount of time, within, I don't know, a very small amount of time, okay? So no transition, nothing. So you can either do this, that it is here right away, or you can make it have some kind of transition, okay? And if you think of the position as a well, maybe a property, as it is right here. Okay, so you have the position property right here inside of your properties tab, and this one of course changes, as you can see, when you have two different statuses, let's say. And think of this one as status 1 and this one as status 2. And what tweening does is that from status 1, so it of course considers this these properties right here, so these values. So the tweening needs the instance it is supposed to do the tweening on, some kind of options it has to consider when tweening, such as the amount of seconds it takes to finish the tween, some styles, so the easing style, the direction, and some other options. And the last part is, let's say, the destination, which is the second status I'm talking about. So the tweening basically makes an instance from this status go from the second status you have defined as your destination with a transition. So it makes things change more fancier, you know? And that's basically what we have done with our stand. We have changed the Welt's position, so the stand's position at the end, with a tween, and it makes things just look more fancier, okay? It makes the position change look far more fancier. And that's the reason for us to use this tweening right here. And so that's actually the idea behind of it. Okay, now we can do one more thing regarding the effects. We could now make the body parts of the stand invisible from the beginning, and then make it visible when it is supposed to appear. So let me use this for IV in pairs loop. So we are going to loop through this test stand get children, and I know that I have to move this loop down here. Come on. Okay, so if V is a mesh part or V is a part, then, and we shouldn't use get children but get descendants, V transparency 1. Okay, and down here we should work with tweening again. So transparency 0. Down here, we can actually do the same, but instead of making the transparency go to 0, we can make the transparency go to 1, and we can add a weight right here, so you can actually see the effect. Okay, and I'm going to explain it as always when it has worked. Okay, it's supposed to be deleted. Yeah. As you can see, there is a transition, so your character is first of all invisible and then turns visible. And that's cool. Okay. So, let me explain what these 4 IV loops do. So, first thing, we have this for IV loop, and it basically loops through an instance, okay? So the instance is given right here. So you usually can consider these as tables, okay? So stand get descendants basically is a table which contains all of the descendants within this stand's model. And those are, of course, these instances, but also the instances inside and the instances inside of the instances which are inside, okay? And if they would have much more instances, then of course they are affected as well. So we are basically looping through everything inside of this character, and we are checking if the instance we are currently at, because we are looping, is either a mesh port or a port. You may ask why, because these instances are capable of having a transparency property. And if we have encountered any of those, which are all of these, and the head and the humanoid root part, so if we have encountered any of those, then we are going to apply this tween on, and I have already explained the tween to you, but we have made some slight changes. So instead of W, we have V, and we want to tween the transparency to 0, and transparency at 0 means it is visible. We are going to make this tween play. Okay. Okay, so went AFK again. I forgot where I've left off. So I have, I think, explained this thing right here. And yeah. So this one is basically the same without any tweening. We just make the body parts invisible from the beginning. And right here, we just do the same as up there, with the only difference that we set transparency to 1, means everything turns invisible before it is being deleted. Okay, and that is actually it for this video. We haven't dealt with the animation now, but we can do that in the next video. So let's just quickly see what we have done. So I press Q and our stand right here appears. Well, we are able to jump and we are able to unequip the stand. And I remember the world video I have made months ago, and many people, I still receive comments today, so many people have experienced issues with it, and I'm sorry for that. So I can understand that you have been experiencing issues, and I'm honest with you, I have experienced them as well, but I don't know how, but in the video they didn't appear, you know. So they seem to appear after the video, and it of course was caused by my poor scripting knowledge, let's say. But I think that this mechanism of the stand right here now works flawlessly, okay? As you can see, I can jump around as I want to. The stand actually spawns behind a few, and it even has a cool effect, okay? So things have changed, guys. Alright. Well, there's one more thing I would like to deal with, just pretty quickly. If the name is not humanoid root part, then end. Okay. Yeah, so there was this part which was not invisible. So there was this part right here. Let me just try and quickly show it to you again. So there basically was this humanoid root part, as you can see. So it has the surface right here, and I have just made it invisible, or let's say kept it invisible, because as you know, every part is invisible by default, and they are being turned to visible down here. But we have excluded the humanoid root part from doing so, because we have checked if the instance we are currently at has not the name humanoid root part. So the humanoid root part always stays invisible. Alright, and that's it with this video, guys. I hope that you have enjoyed it. If so, leave a like, subscribe, share this video to all of your friends, and give me feedback in the comment section on whether you like this series or not, and what you actually expect from the series. And if you have any ideas for the series, then leave me a comment telling me about them, because I really lack of ideas sometimes, and you could be helping me out. And who knows, maybe your idea is going to be part of the next video. Alright, so thanks for watching. Leave a like, subscribe, share this video to all of your friends, and like this video, comment it, and take care. See you in the next video, guys.